When I was a kid, about 8 or 9, my parents used to send me to Sunday school. My family aren't even particularly religious, but it was just the done thing in my town. Plus, I think they liked it because it gave them a few hours to themselves. I lived in a small town and the vicar was a prominent figure in the community. One day we were practicing for a Christmas carol show at the Sunday school. Everyone in the community was going to come and watch. I've never been a good singer, I'm still not today, and get really embarrassed singing or speaking in public. After practice, the vicar told me to stay behind to continue learning some of the songs. In my memory, he was really old, but that's because I was a kid. He was probably only about 40. Anyway, I stayed behind and he started chatting to me, asking about my family and what my favorite subjects are at school, that sort of thing. He was kind, I liked him. After about half an hour, he told me I should get home. We hadn't practiced any of the songs, so he told me I'd have to stay behind next time. I told my parents that I had to stay behind to practice the singing, and they were fine with it. So the next week, I stayed after practice and we chatted again. This time we did practice the songs, but only for about 5 minutes. The rest of the time, we just chatted. We talked for about 45 minutes before he told me I should get home. Before I left, he gave me a hug. When I got home, I remember my dad made a joke about how bad I must be at singing because I'd been kept for so long. This went on every week for a month or so, and it was pretty much the same each time. Practice the songs for a couple of minutes and then chat. I remember one week he shared some chocolates with me, which I didn't find particularly odd because it was Christmas time, and he always hugged me when I left. The Christmas show went well, but when the new year came, the vicar kept making excuses to see me. One day he told me to come by the next day because he had a surprise for me. So I went by the next day and he drove me to the next town where there's a beach. It was the middle of winter, so we didn't go on the beach, but we went into the arcades on the beachfront and played some games. He held my hand as we walked between the arcade games. We must have been there for a couple of hours before he drove me back. He told me not to tell my parents because other people's kids would get jealous, so I told them I'd been helping to clean the church. A few weeks later, I went to stay with my grandparents who lived about an hour away. It was half term, so I stayed with them for the week. The weird thing is, I actually thought about him while I was gone. When I got back, we were busy for a few weeks, so I didn't go to Sunday school. When I eventually returned, there was a new vicar there, a woman. I asked my parents why he had gone, and they said he'd been moved to a new church unexpectedly. About a month later, I got a letter in the post. It was from the vicar. It was quite short and used simple language so I could read it. He said he was having a good time at the new church, but he missed the old church very much. He said he hoped I was still going to Sunday school and learning lots at school. When he signed off the letter, he wrote, "All my love," and then his name. I showed my mum the letter and she went bright red with anger. She tore it up, put it in the bin, and told me that I must promise to tell her if I get another letter from him. I promised, and she gave me a big hug and squeezed me tight. I never heard from the vicar again. A while back, like nearly 10 years ago, me and two buddies, Mark and Alex, did something really silly, but at the time being silly was what we did for fun. We were all 20 and lived in a northern British city with a lot of empty houses. Up on a hilly road near our homes, there was an old abandoned church. People knew about it because it was on a closed-off road in the community and had been empty for a long time. They would often complain that it was an eyesore. Being young, stupid thrill seekers, Mark and I had the bright idea to bring a Ouija board to the church late one night in October. We thought it was a fitting setting for the spooky season. Now, Mark already had a Ouija board for some reason, and Alex drove us to the church. It was dark when we arrived. We had to park on the roadside and walk up the hill to the church since the road was blocked. With a single flashlight, we started walking up the hill, using more lights once we reached the church. The church was surrounded by woods and had a disused parking lot next to it. The front door was already partly open due to previous break-ins. Inside it was dark and graffiti covered the walls. We used our flashlights to check the place was empty and free of rats, and then Alex set up the Ouija board. He also had 3 candles that he placed around the board to make things spookier. Once the candles were lit, we turned off our flashlights. Now the only light was from the candles, creating a really creepy atmosphere. We started messing about with the Ouija board, asking if anyone was there. And then we all laughed as the planchette moved, thinking one of us was moving it. Then we heard a loud cracking sound from the altar. We jumped out of our skin, grabbed the flashlights, switched them on, and shined them in that direction, but there was nothing there. Once we'd taken a second to calm down, we continued playing with the Ouija board. We took turns asking questions until the planchette stopped moving again. We'd stopped laughing now and were getting serious when another sound came from the altar area. Before we could even look up, a rock landed on the Ouija board, scaring us so much that we screamed and jumped to our feet. All 3 of us had had our hands on the board, both hands, a few seconds ago. There's no way any of us could have done that. And it was a big rock too, about the size of a tennis ball. We ran out screaming, leaving the board and candles behind. We legged it down the hill to Alex's car and sat there catching our breath while discussing what just happened. Alex is very spiritual, so he believed we'd encountered a spirit, while Mark and I thought there might have been someone else in the church with us, although we had checked it beforehand with our flashlights. The next day, Alex and Mark returned to the church to retrieve the Ouija board. Strangely, the board was gone, but the candles were still there. Feeling uneasy, they of course left immediately. That experience is still to this day the scariest thing we've ever gone through. Back when I was in school, I had 2 really close friends, Liam and Chris. We always hung out together. When graduation came, Liam had to move from the city to the countryside, about 4 hours drive away, because his dad got a new job that paid way more. So after we all graduated and Liam settled into his new house in a different town, Chris and I got an invite to visit him for a weekend, which we jumped at. When we arrived, we spent the first evening chatting. It was great to see Liam. There wasn't much to do in his new town, so the next day we decided to go for a hike in the nearby woods and fields. While wandering around, we stumbled upon a beautiful river which we decided to walk along. The place was serene and calming and the views were amazing. But as luck would have it, we ended up getting totally lost. We tried following the river, but after a while we lost track of which direction we were headed. With no signs of any houses or people around, we started getting worried. This was before smartphones, so we had no way of contacting anyone. We needed a phone to call Liam's parents. And so even though there wasn't any road in sight, we kept walking along the river hoping to find something. That's when we came across an old brick building that looked like a church. It was quite overgrown with bushes and the surroundings were pretty wild. Curiosity got the better of us and we decided to check if there were people inside who could help us. As we got closer, we found some old cars parked outside, rusty old things with no wheels. But inside the church, there were a few people singing gospel songs. We were relieved to see people, so we walked in. But as soon as we stepped inside, things took a creepy turn. Everyone stopped singing and stared at us with cold, unfriendly looks on their faces. Liam apologized for interrupting and explained that we were lost and just wanted to use a phone. No one said a word. The silence was unsettling and hung in the air. We backed out of there slowly and left the church. As we walked away, we noticed some of the people had followed us and were watching us leave. The faces still held that exact same expression. This freaked us out and we started jogging away. After a while, we reached an old gas station. The man there gave us directions to get back to Liam's place. As we walked, we felt like the man was watching us from a distance too. Eventually, a police officer pulled up and helped us get back to Liam's house. The officer even warned us about some strange folks in the woods.